things that go together really well. 1, high performers. 2, imposter syndrome. If you're a high performer and you've got imposter syndrome, just know it's a good thing. And on today's episode, we will talk about why imposter syndrome is actually a good thing and how you can move through it and reframe your thinking. We're also going to be digging into unspoken conflict. You know when you walk into a meeting room and there are eggshells and you're like, what is happening here? And you know it's awkward, but no one's willing to say that it's awkward. Well, we're going to give you some strategies for how you deal with the unsaid, awkward conflict on Teams. And we're going to wrap up with a question that is such a banger. And we've got a really good question about what do you do in the first 90 days when you're a new leader? Let's go. This is a podcast about making work work. You'll learn about leadership, career growth, and how to navigate those weird work challenges. I run a HR consulting business called Boldside, where I help leaders build epic team cultures. If you lead a team or run a business and you think I can help, let's connect on LinkedIn. My name is Shelley Johnson, and this is Work. This question has come through from Christy. How do high performers manage imposter syndrome without letting it leak into their leadership?
The leadership piece is an interesting twist on this one. Shell, you and I haven't really talked about imposter syndrome.
Have we not?
Not really. Like as in for ourselves. Is that something you've experienced?
Sorry, I jumped in too early. No, yes, I have.
Like you're high performing, you're a leader. You got the
and imposter syndrome. Yeah, I mean, I have. But it's really interesting because I was thinking about this question, and for me, one thing that's really helped manage imposter syndrome in both work but also in leadership is just reframing it as a positive. Like I just don't see it as an inherently negative thing. In fact, I think people who don't have imposter syndrome freak me out.
Yeah,
because I'm like, if you just walk into spaces that feel beyond you and you're totally confident, that's terrifying.
Are you a bit out of touch maybe with like what's going on or where the learning opportunities are, where your shortcomings are?
Exactly. Like, are you self-aware?
Yeah.
Because if you walk into a room and you're doing something you've never done before and you don't feel imposter syndrome, like I'm nervous on your behalf.
There you go. So I think it's interesting you say that as far as like spinning it as a positive, and I don't know how hard you've had to work on that. I feel like I've come from a similar place in that I've not found imposter syndrome crippling to me. There's been plenty of other things that have, I'm sure. But for me, I have also treated imposter syndrome as like, okay, this is somewhat of an objective thing. It's not an emotion. It's not been an emotional thing for me. It's been something where I go, right, I feel like I don't know a lot about this, so how do I go and learn? And like learning and I guess getting my head around new things, new information is a strength of mine. So actually then playing into what I do have as my strengths to close those gaps, build that confidence has worked for me.
I think as well, if you think, so this person, Christy, I'm just going to talk to you for a sec about this. I would just say if you're feeling right now, whatever your role is, I feel imposter syndrome, I feel out of my comfort zone. And often the narrative we tell ourselves when we're in those moments is, I don't have what it takes. And so I want you to kind of sit with that and go, okay, well, when have I had previous examples where I've felt out of my comfort zone and I've actually worked through that and ended up doing well? Because like we're always looking for and hypersensitive to the risk, the potential for downside, the potential to embarrass ourselves. But if you look over your recent past or even longer, you'll have so many examples where you did something you've never done before. And over time, you realize, actually, I've gotten pretty good at that. And that's where I think we need to also look for the counter evidence that we have what it takes versus the evidence of I don't have what it takes, because that's the negative view of imposter syndrome. And I also think it's a mindset issue more than it is often a skill issue.
I agree. And the evidence piece is a good word for me because I think about like data points. So I haven't, as I said, I haven't found imposter syndrome to be something that's crippling. Sure, it's popped up here and there. But one of the things that happened for me recently, going to this idea of evidence and looking for that to prove that you can, I found myself, so I've had a job change recently, which we haven't gone into detail with. I think we'll just keep breadcrumbing and we'll talk about that at some point. But one of the reflections that I had was I'd had a period of parental leave, and then my role was probably already in a place before that and continued for a little while after that to be not overly challenging to me. And actually I realized that once upon a time where I was like on the steep learning curve, I was really building so much evidence within myself to go, when I don't know how to do something, I can think of so many times in the last day, week, month, year that I've overcome that because I've learnt, I've had a crack, and I'll be fine. I'd realised that for maybe a couple of years there, 18 months, a couple of years, I wasn't able to find as many of those examples. And so actually that imposter syndrome noise in my mind started to become a little bit louder. And so what I needed to do was go, well, how do I build up more of that evidence that's more recent that can reprove to myself that, oh no, I've still got it. I don't need to let that imposter syndrome get the better of me.
And what was the things that helped? Like if you think about more recently where you put yourself in a situation that you're like, okay, cool, I feel like I am out of my comfort zone. Like what are some examples of that?
Do you know what? One of them is probably like even the podcast. So even public speaking and just coming back to the podcast more regularly and feeling rusty, but then going, no, you've done this once before. How can you feel back in the flow, back in the groove? Now, a bit of that is just getting up the reps, so just turning up and having that exposure. Some of it, though, has also been having conversations with you and seeking out feedback. And that feedback is really around like, how can I be better? How can we make this better? And then putting some other structures in place that work for me. So having conversations between us where we go, let's check back in on our strategy, on our formulas, on what works. How am I preparing? So being actually quite intentional, not just turning up and hoping for the best, has been a big one. The other one that comes to mind for me is, so I worked for the same business for almost 15 years. People who have listened for a while will know that business is called Rare Kind, or is called Rare Kind, I should say. And I would somewhat jokingly say to people close to me from time to time, I'm sure you're one of them, am I really good at my job at Rare Kind? Or am I really good at my job? Like, I guess I had this thing in my mind that wondered, have I just become really good at working at that particular place because I know that business so well? And so it's been also an element of just give it a crack, just push myself outside my comfort zone. And what's been really nice, it's still early days, I think, 5 or 6 weeks, so very early days. But what's been really nice is I'm pretty quickly going, I do know some stuff that can actually apply and I can add value outside of that particular employer environment, out of that particular business. There are transferable skills, and that's been confidence boosting as well.
It's just even hearing you unpack that, I was thinking about how our default setting is to look for the negative. Like, so you, instead of looking at, I worked at Rare Kind for 15 years and I've got heaps of grit and I can stick out a job where lots of people, tenure now is like, average tenure is 3 years in Australia. So like, you're an outlier, you've got all this perseverance, persistence, determination, and all these things that are positives of that. We default almost to the negative. Oh, have I just got comfortable here? Could I actually, could these skills I've built here in this environment transfer to different contexts? And so I think it goes to this idea with imposter syndrome of seeing it as an inherently negative thing. And I think, like, I don't know when imposter syndrome as a term got introduced to the world of work. Like, it feels like it's been around for a long time, but I don't know in my first job, like if I think about my first real HR job 12 plus years ago, 15 years ago, I don't think people were talking about imposter syndrome back then. I don't remember it being referred to. And I kind of think about what is the language we would have used? And I think we would have used things like learning. I think we would have used things like, I feel a bit out of my depth. And I kind of was thinking about this idea of, why does imposter syndrome only apply to work context, but we don't use it in our personal life? Because I think about when I became a mum for the first time. I wasn't thinking I'm an imposter. I've never been a mum before.
You're just thinking, I don't know what to do here.
I don't know what to do. And I'm like,
I say that as a personal experience.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm not saying it. I've just got really big imposter syndrome because I'm a mum now.
Yeah.
Like, no, I'm saying I'm out of my depth. I'm really emotional and overwhelmed.
Someone probably wanted to write a book about this, so they had to come up with a term for it.
But I want us to sit with this for just a moment because I think it's important the narrative we put around these terms that actually become either a blocker or an opportunity. So it's like an obstacle or an opportunity. And I think when you reinforce this concept of I have imposter syndrome, I am an imposter, I'm not good enough, I've got all this self-doubt versus I'm a bit out of my depth, I'm learning a new skill, but hey, like heaps of people have learned how to be a mum before me. So I'm sure I can figure it out. And I just wonder in a work sense, knowing actually, do you know what? Every single person in this business has felt out of their depth at some point and they've had to learn a new skill. Versus every single person in this business also feels like an imposter and they probably shouldn't have the job.
Yeah, because imposter is such a loaded word. I think to go to the leadership element of this question, and that's something that I really liked, it felt really unique to this question is because we have so many conversations or we hear so much about imposter syndrome, but to actually go, well, and how do people ensure that doesn't affect their leadership? Richard Branson's not a name that, we talk about often, but I just happened to be listening to a podcast episode that he was interviewed on recently. And something that stood out to me was the interviewer said, Richard, you've started and run so many different businesses like record label, airline, credit card, or at least financing company, like the list goes on. How the heck do you do that? Do you know about all of these things? And he basically went, no, I don't know about any of them. I just employ people and find people to surround myself with who are experts in that field. So I think from a leadership point of view, it's also important to recognize that perhaps the higher you go in leadership, the less relevant it becomes for you to actually be the subject matter expert. And what you need to become really good at is being really comfortable not knowing the answer, but being able to ask for it. And one of the, I don't know if it's a trick or not, but one of the things that I find myself doing super practically, so I've long had some responsibility to work with, the company's accountant, for example, or the financial controller. And yet I've still got responsibility to be astute commercially and to understand the numbers. But I'll often, in a lighthearted way, just say to the accountant, so, I'm like, my imposter syndrome's possibly about to show up here as I pretend to be an accountant. And then I'll map out my observations, but give them full license to correct me, steer me in a different direction at the same time as, I guess, giving myself full license to be wrong or to be misguided or to have, not quite articulated something the perfect way, if that makes sense.
And I think it's nice when people say, hey, excuse my ignorance on this, or hey, I may be misunderstanding, but I'm just going to say what's on my mind and tell me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And being able to lean into that. There's a humility that comes with it, but also being able to use humor in that way. It did remind me, I was, my first proper HR leadership gig started when I was 24. I would say quite immature, and was leading a team, and everyone was quite a lot older than me. So in their mid-30s to 50s. And so I'm there green as, and I wanted to prove myself. And in the first 4 weeks, I just made so many dumb moves, just countless dumb moves as a leader trying to impress people with how smart I was. And the funniest thing about that, when you try to impress people, it's almost like the opposite. It has the opposite impact, where the more you try to impress others, the less likely you are to actually impress them. Whereas instead, being impressed by the people on that team of all the expertise that they bring and trying to understand that. And so if I was to go back in time and tell myself as an early leader, what would you do if you feel out of your depth, you feel a bit of imposter syndrome? Well, don't try to impress people because it's going to backfire. And instead flip it and go, how do I understand the expertise of the people on this team? What do they all bring to the table? And how can I help them to do their best stuff, which inevitably makes you look good anyway. So I think it's counterintuitive, but the more impressed you are by other people, that actually benefits you versus trying to feel like I have to have all the answers. I have to be the smartest person in the room. And it's like, if you try to be the smartest person in the room, guaranteed you are not.
And yeah, as you've identified, it sounds like people could tell that you were trying extra hard, pedaling extra hard. I think some of the risks of trying to cover up your imposter syndrome instead of working with it, particularly as a leader, it can be that you come in over prepared. And, you know, there's a time waste associated with that, as well as people around you feeling like it's just all a bit much. You can end up, some people, it might be that you end up micromanaging and you just become too controlling because you're not willing to loosen your grip on the situation or on the team. It could also be that you take too long to make decisions. You know, if you're caught up in your own imposter syndrome as a leader and people are coming to you and you feel like you need to know all the answers all the time, then you're at risk of actually taking too long to get back to them or to make a call on something because you're over-processing and trying to find it, when really asking, well, what do you think? What would you do? Or saying, I don't know, but let's go find the answer, and seeking out whoever that subject matter expert is.
And I think that's a great call out. The practical steps of just saying, hey, what would you do here? Or you tell me your thoughts. Like, I know you've got heaps of good ideas. And being able to just put that back onto the individual, I think it's actually a really good strategy when you don't know.
Totally. Yeah, it doesn't matter whether you're feeling the imposter syndrome or you're a leader or not.
Just like, hey, I'm not sure, but what do you think?
And then you learn. That's learning, and you take that with you to the next conversation.
Do you want to grow in your career? Are you after a fresh start or some inspiration? Or perhaps you're in a career crisis? The book Sort Your Career Out and Make More Money by Shelley Johnson and Glenn James is such a great resource at any stage in your career. It will give you practical strategies for things like getting a promotion, making more money, moving into a leadership role, taking career risks, or if it's time to quit your job, and so much more. You can find Sort Your Career Out and Make More Money wherever good books are sold or via the link in the podcast show notes. It's also available as an audiobook.
Shell, the next question that we've had, look, I think this is up there with one of your fave topics, and it's this idea of unspoken conflict. So the question says, there's a lot of unspoken conflict on my team. What should I do? Dear Shell, what should I do?
Dear Shell. Okay, so I love this. Do you know when you, like the idea of unspoken conflict, you know when you go into a room, a meeting room, and you just feel the vibes are off?
Yes. Yes is the short answer. It's like, yeah, you're sort of really quickly looking for, how do I bring a bit of light to this room? And you go blank if you're anything like me and can't find any appropriate small talk.
And also you just like, I find people start looking around to gauge what are other people doing. Yeah. So we start reading the room, maybe over-analysing what happens. And I kind of think about it, it's either there's an elephant in the room that everyone knows but they're not saying, or there's just eggshells. And so either elephants or eggshells, bad times for all. So this idea of unspoken conflict, one of the reasons it's hard to address is because it's underground. So it's like it's under the surface and no one is prepared to go there. And we've all worked on teams where this is the case, where everyone knows the problem and no one's willing to name the problem. And we've got a couple of strategies at Boldside we would recommend you use, especially if you're a leader. So if you're in a leadership role, but you can use this whatever your role, there's a couple of very, very practical strategies. So the first one is what we call odd. So think about anytime you see anything odd at work, think ODD, observe, distance, diagnose. And this is how it works. So what are you observing? What are you noticing? And you're looking for the facts. So you're not looking for the subtlety of the feelings. You're looking for, okay, in this meeting, someone keeps interrupting a particular person and cutting them off. And that's happened 3 or 4 times in this one meeting alone. So you're just looking for what are the facts. Don't like get into all the feelings. At this stage, you're just thinking about what actually happened. So that's your observe stage. So you're just noticing. The next stage is what we call distance. And distance is not time. Like people think, I just need to create a bit of distance.
Oh, I had a visual. You know is it GIF or GIF? We never know.
I never know.
That thing. And it's like the Forrest Gump just like running.
Yes.
That's the visual I got, but I don't think that's what you're about to describe.
No, but that's good. Yeah, so distance is not like just legging it out of there. So you're like, oh, there's heaps of problems in this room.
I've observed something and I am out.
I'm out. My resignation is on my boss's desk today. Distance is like psychological distancing. And so all you're doing, and this is a technique that you can use in any kind of high stakes conflict, but also when it's more subtle, you can use it in any tricky situation at work. So let's say there's an issue on the team. I'm actually feeling quite emotional about it. Someone keeps cutting me off. I'm feeling like there's all this unspoken tension. I don't know how to deal with it. What I'm going to do is create some psychological distance. And the way that we do that is we ask ourselves a couple of questions. So one question is, what happened versus what am I making it mean? So what happened is this person's interrupted me multiple times. What I'm making it mean is that they think that I'm dumb. They think that my voice doesn't matter. Whereas what could it mean? It could mean that they actually just aren't self-aware enough to notice that they're doing that to other people. Like it could mean all these other things. So what you're really doing is you're challenging your assumptions in that distance space. So you're looking at the situation from a couple of different angles. And then the last one is diagnose. So diagnose is you're giving the situation some kind of label. And the reason why we like labeling is we try to get clear on what is it that I'm actually saying is the problem. Now, that's not a person, that is what is the problem. So the problem might be that on this team, people don't listen. Like people don't listen to one another. Or on this team, people are unwilling to talk about tough issues. And so that means we can't actually solve stuff, we can't improve because we're unwilling to talk about pain points. So you've got to give the situation a label. And then what that does is it helps you anchor, okay, what do I actually think is going on? Because in conflict, what tends to happen is it can get quite convoluted. So then we go, oh, maybe it's me, or maybe I'm making this up. We start gaslighting ourselves, like all those things start to happen. So I want you to go observe, what are you noticing? What are the facts? Distance, look at it from multiple angles, challenge your own assumptions, remove some of the emotion, and then diagnose, give the situation a label, which will help you navigate the confusion that often comes with conflict. Now, once you've done that, what that does is it gives you something to talk about. So then I'm going to take that little kind of 3-step process. I'm going to talk to my manager about it and say, hey, I just wanted to know, maybe I'm off here, but I've noticed this thing on our team. We tend not to listen to one another. I noticed X person interrupted someone multiple times. I feel like their voice isn't heard. Can we talk about that? So you're getting what is unspoken to the surface. And that's the step one in being able to resolve it. And from there, we start to navigate, okay, well, how do we address this? But as you're hearing that, that's like the kind of early initial thing. There's like heaps more we can go into. What are your thoughts?
Well, I was just going to tease out your last piece of that puzzle that you just described around you could take that to your manager. I can also hear a voice, which is the manager taking it to the team or taking it to the individual or individuals that they perhaps see as being at the center of it, and they just want to understand that a little bit better. I also, you've used this phrasing before, and it's like, and I've heard others say it as well, where you loosely hold something. So
Yes.
It's like, a strong belief or a strong idea, but loosely held. And I also wonder if as you're moving through this, particularly around the diagnosis piece, it's like, let's hold that loosely. So go into any following conversations with your ideas as like a hypothesis.
Yes.
And you're looking to either prove that hypothesis or disprove it and maybe learn something new.
100%. So we would say it's an initial diagnosis, but you're open to more testing. So,
Yeah,
when you get
love
like
that.
a diagnosis from your doctor and like, oh, we think you might have low iron, let's go get your bloods done.
Yes. Or I'd like a second opinion, please.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's an initial diagnosis, not a firm belief. And when we were coming up with this model, we were like, hypothesis would work best, but it just doesn't roll. So
No.
ODH was never going to fly, like odd.
Sounds like some other definition.
I know. We're like,
some
no,
sort
we
of
want-
medical condition.
We're like, odd. Odd is what we want. Whenever you have an odd thing happen on your team, you've got to commit this to memory. But yes, you've got to be open to being wrong. So what I've noticed is that it doesn't seem like we listen to each other. Can we talk about that? And can you give me your view?
And are you deliberately or intentionally, I should say, using the word we there? Like you're going into that conversation and I guess it's pitching it a little bit more gently. You're not just imposing blame on the person sitting across from you or somebody else. You're saying we because it's got this idea of we're all in it together.
Yeah, and especially if it's a pattern or trend that we've seen across the board on the team, I think it is a we problem. The other way you could frame it is, I've noticed this trend on our team where we seem to XYZ, whatever that is. It's just less threatening kind of language or less finger pointing and more open. I mean, sometimes it's tricky though because we can use we to soften when really it is a particular person's thing that they need to own. But I love that language. I also love, and I've talked about it on the pod before, but that CEO I worked for would often use when there's unspoken conflict, but he wasn't able to get to a diagnosis. So he wasn't able to determine, well, what is causing this, because it was just too convoluted and messy. He would use this language of, are we okay? And it's just such an open thing. It's just, especially if it's between you and, say, a direct report, and you just get the feeling that something's off. It's like, hey, are we okay?
Yeah, I guess the risk with that question is that I could sit here and particularly if I'm not stoked at the moment with something, I might go, yep. And that could become a dead end. I like to think, though, that particularly as a leader, you're able to then open the conversation up further by going, okay, that's interesting. Something I've been feeling is, or something I've noticed is.
Yes. And just being able to sit in the silence. We're running this workshop with a team of leaders this week, and we were talking about this question of unspoken conflict and how do you handle it? How do you actually get it to the surface? And they're emerging leaders, first time in management roles. And they were talking about how they have a team of introverts and they've noticed there is a lot of unsaid stuff. And you can just feel it, but no one's prepared to go there. And it made me remember back to mediation training I did like early in my HR career. And they teach you in mediation in high stakes conflict. And see if you can do this with me. So they tell you, so sit up and lean back in your chair. So we're just doing this live. So sit back, lean back in your chair. And so they say, feel the back of your seat chair.
Yep.
So I want you to feel it. So
my feet don't reach the ground.
I know, your feet do not reach the ground.
That's okay. We'll get a box for next time you put me through a practical exercise.
So right now I want you to feel wherever you are. So let's say you're on the train right now or you are in your car listening to this. I want you to do this with me. So sit back in your chair, shoulders back, and then you're going to feel the back of your seat chair. So from your lower back, notice how it sits on your lower back. Notice how the chair feels on the middle part of your back and on the upper part of your back. And so just sit, feel the back of your seat chair. What they tell you in mediation training is that, and now I'm leaning forward because I feel like I'm too far away from the mic, but what they tell you is that anytime you're in a conflict scenario with a person, that silence is the best thing to surface unsaid disagreement. So when conflict or disagreement goes underground, the single best thing to get it to the surface is silence. But what do we know about human nature is that none of us like silence.
I do, but
you do, but you're weird.
I'm a weirdo.
You're an exception to the rule.
And, you know, that's a learned love, I would say. Like not through mediation training or those environments, but I've certainly experienced the power of silence myself in conversations at work.
And so what you do in this scenario, instead of leaning forward. So when we lean forward, it's a neurological signal to our brain, to our mouth that we're about to speak. And so that's why people, when they lean forward, are more likely to interrupt.
There you go.
So if you can sit back and you ask a question to your team to say, hey, I'm just feeling that maybe there's some unsaid stuff and I just want to give people the chance to share today what they're thinking and feeling about this particular project. And you lean back, you feel the back of your seat chair and you shut up.
And you're physically creating space in front of you, inviting others to lean into that and speak.
Exactly. And so what you're doing in that moment, by physically reminding yourself, do not jump in and fill the space, people then, because we don't like awkward silence, with you as the exception, people feel it. And they say things because they're like, oh, I've got to fill this space. And so I want you to try that. If you've got conflict on your team and you want to address it, and I mean, that's why they teach you to use silence in sales, because like people feel the silence like, hey, what's your budget? And then you stop. And then people are like, oh, okay, I'll tell you all my secrets.
Yeah, even you see it, this is moving away from conflict, but you see that similar technique work if you're in a meeting on Zoom and you say, has anyone got any questions? If you only give 5 seconds and then quickly move to, okay, great, well, that's all for today, you actually haven't created space for people to process the question, think about and what they might like to ask, build up the courage to ask that, find their unmute button, and then ask as well. So there's something to be said in many scenarios, I think, for using that strategy and giving yourself that time to just count to 20.
It feels long when you're the one initiating it. But for people thinking, especially if they're introverted and they think before they speak, which is a great skill, they're actually just going, okay, they're not worrying about what you're doing. They're thinking about, okay, well, what might I actually need to say that hasn't been said? So strategies like that can be really practical, like physical cues to get you to not fill the space. Silence is a really key thing for creating spaces where people can share unsaid points of disagreement or conflict.
Beautiful. I knew you were the right woman for the job on that question.
Well, we've got one more. We're going to quickly do this one. And this is a really good one, actually. So I'm new to leadership. What can I do in the first 90 days to start well and build credibility?
I'm a big fan of that 90-day chunk. I haven't really heard anyone challenge it, but I'd be interested if others have different perspectives. I think, though, it's so easy, whether you're starting in a new business or you've been promoted in the business that you're in, to just have that snowball effect happen where you get swept up in the tidal wave. How many other metaphors can I use? And visual,
the snowball to the tidal wave.
Yeah, like I'm just feeling it and seeing it all. You can just get swept up so quickly. And so I love the idea of being more intentional around your first 90 days. I think for me, it then feels like it makes a lot of sense to chunk it down to like month 1, month 2, month 3. Some of the things that came up for me, if I'm considering what does month 1 look like, I'm suggesting you're basically focusing quite simply on listening, learning, and relationships.
Yeah, nice.
Now, again, everything I'm going to talk to, I'm really coming at that from a place of it doesn't matter whether you've already been in the business and you've been promoted or you're into a new business. It's like this reset opportunity or this opportunity to just start soaking, be the sponge, start soaking. Don't feel like you need to hit the ground running, so to speak, and like change too many things or try and do or achieve too much. It's foundational stuff. You're making observations. You're building your understanding. And along the way, assuming you know nothing so that way you're really open book to whatever you might find.
I like that, assuming you know nothing. I think it's a really kind of refreshing stance. I do feel like when new leaders come in too hot, it just gets people on the back foot. So I love that idea of listening, learning, and building relationships. Some of the things that I jotted down, what do you do in the first 90 days to start well, is spend time getting to know the team. Like just get to know what makes people tick, get to know them as individuals and get to know, okay, based on the individuals in this team, how do we show up as a collective group as well? So you're looking for what motivates each individual person. And we do this activity. We did this recently at one of our team retreats where it's kind of like a things you need to know about me. And it becomes like a guide to how to work with the different personalities within the group. And I would say for any new leader, do this in one of your early team meetings. It's super fun, but it's just a way to fast track getting to know people. And there are a couple of questions we would ask. So number 1 is, what are your work preferences? Like, what does it look like when you are working really well? So it might be, my work preferences are that I like to do deep work in the morning. And the afternoons I like to have meetings because like it doesn't require as much like deep focus time. And I like to go for a walk on my lunch break or whatever your work preferences are. Then your work pet peeves, so the things that annoy you, and get really clear about what those are. Like we have a list longer than our arm.
Yeah.
Things that annoy us.
For some reason that list is longer than the preferences, but anywho.
Like one of my pet peeves is people playing music out loud in the office.
And we keep finding them too. I feel like we move through the world and then we're like, oh yeah, actually, can I add that to my list now? That's another pet peeve of mine.
It's really helpful though, because then you're like, you get to know people in such a like, it just shortcuts a lot of the learning by failure.
Yeah, and you can have a bit of a laugh too. I think it's a nice, safe place for people to like have a laugh at their own pet peeves, but also be like, no, seriously, don't do this.
I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, look, the one that comes to mind for me immediately is like, don't text me before you call me. Like, don't text and say, hey, can I give you a call? Just call me. That's what voicemails are for. If I can answer, I'll answer. And if I can't, I can't. Or, you know, if you're sitting in an office and you get that DM message that says, can I talk to you for a sec? It's like, okay, I could probably stretch my arm out and reach you and like, how about you just come over and say, hey, can we have a chat?
And the really interesting thing about that is that pet peeve of yours would be a preference of someone else's.
Totally.
And so this is why it's cool to know, because I'm like, don't just call me.
Yeah, I just think it adds more steps that I just am like, oh, I don't have
it's
time
inefficient.
for that. Yeah.
But also, I mean, that goes to your strengths. And the other thing we did add to our list was strengths, right? So what are your strengths? And then the next question was, what do your strengths look like when you're under stress? So for people who are really good at responsibility, they take responsibility for a lot of things. When they're under stress, that may go into overdrive, and it means working ridiculous hours. It means like killing yourself for a deadline.
Yeah, or doing it yourself. So, you know, perhaps other perfectionists can also relate. It's like, I'll just do it myself. That's how I know it's going to be done right and on time.
Yeah, instead of delegating. So I think all these things are really nice. It's a really nice way to, in your first month, run a team meeting, do things you need to know about me. So you're going to ask, what are your strengths? What do your strengths look like under stress? What are your work preferences, and what are your work pet peeves? And that will give you so much good insight into your team.
Hey, before we move to month 2, which is what I was thinking we might do, but don't let me cut you off. The other one I would say here is understanding as a leader, like what's your mandate? So not just understanding the team, but from whoever your leadership is, whoever your manager is, really understanding why did they bring you into this role, or why did they create this role? There will be, as much as we're coming in with no assumptions and we need to go and find all of our own observations and insights and gather some data, I believe that you still need to understand, like, what is the business objective for this role?
Yeah, good. Perfect. So month 2.
Yeah, so here's where I started to think about words like communication, vision, alignment, and credibility. So you continue to roll on with what you've been doing in month 1, and you're just adding a layer to that in my mind. So we're really wanting to get clear on the priorities. We've started to build some ideas in month 1 about what the priorities and pain points are, but let's get super clear and actually go, okay, here are our top 3 to 5 priorities that we're now going to build a 6 to 12 month plan off the back of. Starting to get clearer around expectations and communicating those with the team. So you're taking some more, I guess, ownership of the team and ownership of that leadership role, I guess. Through doing that, sharing your observations and bringing a bit of a rhythm or some routines and rituals to the team as well, and then starting to embed those. And lastly, I'd add that by this point, I do think it's important to start to get some quick wins. So what are your low-hanging fruit? As much as you've got your bigger picture, 3 to 5 priorities that might need to go into a 6 to 12 month roadmap, let's actually think about what have you heard from the team in the first month that you can just, again, build some credibility, strengthen those relationships by going, let's nip that in the bud, let's make this quick and easy change. And then they feel a sense of like, okay, I've been heard. This person has actually listened and understood. And whilst they can't change the world overnight, they're demonstrating that they're keen to act and get a couple of things done.
Yeah, and I think in that first 2 months, the other thing, in addition to like, hey, what are the priorities? What are the expectations? I think you need to start setting expectations with the team of how you lead things like one-on-ones, like what is our structure and like meeting cadence, all those things that become, as you say, rhythms. And one thing I would do, and I didn't mention this probably in month 1, but definitely in month 2, is actually saying to the team, hey, this is like what it's going to look like us working together. These are my expectations of how I do feedback. So you can expect this from me. And our one-on-ones are going to look like this structure, but every single time we meet, there's going to be a feedback conversation, both things that are going amazing and anything we can do to improve. If you front load that expectation, you actually make your life so much easier, because people tend to think, I'll address an issue when it arises, instead of assuming, hey, we're going to have there will be issues. Every single team has problems. And if you anticipate that and you go, hey, here's how we're going to, whenever we encounter problems or challenges, we're going to have conversations around that. I just want you to expect that from the outset. And if you can say that up front to people, preempt it, then when it happens, it's no surprise. We knew this was going to happen, and we're just going to do what we said we would do, which is have great, honest, healthy conversations.
And you can apply even this 90-day plan. Like, don't let it be a secret. Why not in that first coffee catch-up that you have with each individual when you're meeting with the team in month 1, even give them the clarity and the vision for the 90 days. Hey, for this first month, I really just want to hear from you guys. So you'll find that I'm sitting in on meetings, I'm catching up with each person one-on-one. I'm a sponge here. I'll start to make my own observations and I'll build my own perspective on things, but I'm really open arms looking for you to share. Here are the things that you'll get from me as well along the way. Then month 2, that's when I want us to start feeling like we're getting some quick wins. I want to start to introduce a little bit more structure, and I'll be clearer with you about what my expectations are going forward, what our priorities are. And then month 3, we'll get to that in a second, but you can actually, I don't think leadership needs to be a secret. I think the best thing you can do is actually let your team know what you're doing.
I love that. Even the way that you phrased that then, it's quite comforting for a team to go, oh, okay, cool, this is what it's going to look like.
Yeah, they're not left guessing, because it's a huge shift for everyone to have a new leader coming in.
Oh, it's so full on. I was talking to someone the other day and they were like, oh, I'm getting a new manager. And they were like, anytime I've had a new manager, I've often thought of quitting.
Wow.
Because it's just, and because they've loved all the managers they've worked for. They've worked for heaps of amazing managers. And they're like, so it's just such a disruptive, and the power of a great manager and the power of one that's not so great. And so it just reminds me that it is a really unsettling time. And so the things you can do to stabilize, like communicate, hey, here's my 90-day plan, this is what it looks like. I think it's really reassuring for a group of people who are feeling maybe destabilized.
Yeah, and remove as many unknowns as you can. The other thing is, we all know that it's so taxing on time and energy when you're training someone. And when a new leader comes into your team and they are sitting down with you and they're asking you lots of questions and they need to come up to speed, even if you're not the person formally training them as such, you're still needing to carve out some of your own time and energy and headspace and go over what might feel like old ground to you to bring them up to speed. And yeah, that's tolling on everybody. So I think particularly if you're in a situation where maybe there's been a bit of a revolving door of managers, you might feel a little bit like, oh, here we go again. But I think if you can just hopefully set them up for success by sharing with them, and in return have them feel like they're really buying into the journey and giving you a sense of what that looks like, that would help the relationship.
So what then do you have for month 3? What are you looking at?
So month 3 is where stuff starts to get pretty real in my mind. Like you've got that plan for the top 3 to 5 priorities over the next 6 to 12 months, and you're delivering results. We're not necessarily ticking those off in their entirety, but we've moved beyond low-hanging fruit. Again, we're continuing the rhythm of building relationships and observing, and we're also continuing to get quick wins, but we've got more structure to that, and we're starting to go deep. Well, we're well and truly going deeper. So delivering results, you really as a leader taking ownership. So you've shifted out of, in my mind, that month 1 sort of dynamic, which is like, you tell me, what do I need to know? And you are taking ownership of the team, and you are really standing up as a leader. People are clear about your expectations. You're having feedback conversations. You're not coming in too hot. You obviously need to stay true to a really amazing leadership style and your own leadership style, but you feel more embedded in the team in that sense. It's still early days though, so I imagine there'd be a level of discomfort. You're not necessarily part of the furniture yet, but you're really having to own that space. And you're starting to feel comfortable, or even if you're not, you're starting to challenge and make more changes, and that momentum is really building to embed. I'd also like to think at this point that you're able to speak to the people that you report to, so your manager or the leadership team above you, and actually give them evidence around the results that you're delivering as well.
Yeah, I think that playback to your own manager is really important in that. And I would say, I'd hope that by month 3, all your team members have clear sense of, okay, these are my objectives and key results. This is what we're going after. There's a sense of, okay, cool, this is how I work best with this person. And I think it is a really nice roadmap, and then being able to be clear with your team, as you say, around, okay, here's what to expect from me in the first 90 days. And going back to that 90 days, it will fly by. So it will feel quick, and you're still going to feel new.
And at the same time, there will be other things that pop up. People will be asking, that snowball will still be rolling down the hill. You'll be sticking to your 90-day plan. and you will have tasks coming in, responsibilities coming in. Someone will resign. There'll be a performance issue. Like all of the normal business as usual stuff will need to intersect with this. And it's how do I stay on path with my 90-day plan at the same time as navigating the BAU of leadership.
Beautiful. I think that is an amazing roadmap. So anyone who is looking to get into leadership or in that early days, really cool to come back to and go, okay, here's this 90-day plan that I can follow to lead well and set my team up for success. Em, thanks for hanging out. If you enjoyed this podcast, I want you to do two things. I want you to share it with someone who needs to hear it, send it to a friend or a few friends. And if you listen on Apple or Spotify, we'd love you to give us a 5-star rating and review because it helps us get the pod out there, get more people listening, which is what we want because we're needy.
Thanks, Shell.
Yeah, I actually think you're not needy at all, but I will speak for myself. In that moment. Hey, love you. Bye.
If you have enjoyed the show today, forward it to a friend, colleague, or family member who you may think it would benefit. Shelley's business Boldside provides leadership training for a variety of different businesses. To learn more, visit boldside.com.au. If you would like to book Shelley to speak at one of your events, please reach out to the team via moneypodcast.com.au.